Good morning, Bitcoiners. Indeed, Brian. Indeed. Let me know how the audio is coming through. Let me know how the video is coming through. It's a different setup, so you never know. You never know, right? You just never know. Good morning, bon matin. Welcome back, Nolan. Thank you, Where Do I Sats? I'm happy to be back. I'm enjoying the cool weather and spring feel. Great energy. Sounds good. Thanks. Where do I sats? Yeah, I do not have a hardline connection right now. I'm on Wi-Fi, so that was one of the things I learned over the past little while about how to make a good live stream. You need that physical connection. So we'll see how it goes. I don't think we're going to be too long today. Indeed, King Mansa Musa. The sun is shining. Indeed, let me remind you all, the sun is up even though I am no longer in the south. We love the sun up north. The days are longer. We're getting more sun here. It's bonus sun. And Bitcoin's running just fine, everyone. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Yesterday was a funny day in the news, wasn't it? We got a lot of funny things we're going to cover this morning. So first, as you know, we like to start every one of these mornings together with Moscow time, the absolute fakest news we can find. I got a good one here. I got to add a little context because it might not come through. It's not really a punchline. It's just a bit of context, right? We need some context. So this is from Reuters, and they're talking about the trouble in Ukraine, and it's a sad thing, of course, right? We don't like to hear about Ukrainians dying. Absolutely not. And we're certainly excited that the Ukrainians can defend themselves. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't other things we can discuss about Russia and what's going on, and we do all the time here, but let's just remember people are dying. And so Reuters has done a piece on some of the Ukrainian divisions, battalions, the new training ones, right? And here's something they didn't think they should mention in any way. Just a second. Here it is. Newly recruited servicemen for the Spartan Storm Brigade. This is from Reuters, right? So newly recruited servicemen for the Spartan Storm Brigade practice target firing and battlefield first aid in an undisclosed location in Ukraine's Kharkiv region. A serviceman with the nom de guerre, not his real name, the nom de guerre, Adolf, said they had been trained in first aid tactics and firing drills. So they interviewed, they're trying to encourage Ukraine along here, right? Who's coming, worried about some of the casualties. So they found a guy named Adolf, and he's working, it says nom de guerre, and he's working for the SS Brigade, the Spartan Storm Brigade, which some people call the SS Brigade. So Reuters, good. Thanks for the article. Good to know who we're supporting here. Adolf from the SS Brigade. Excellent. Here's another one from Wall Street Silver, who is a lot of fun to follow. And he's picking up on a Bloomberg article. And the Bloomberg article is this: Bloomberg Business. The Nordstream explosion remains an unsolved mystery gripping Europe. That's their headline. Unsolved mystery. Now, I will put a bit of context. So Wall Street Silver says, talking about this Bloomberg article, he says, this is why legacy corporate media is failing and Twitter is the new media replacing them. The Nord Stream explosion is not a mystery to anyone at all. Oh, and indeed, there was some interesting news yesterday. Just a second. Sorry about that. Kids are very excited and running around, and they got plenty of house to run in, so they don't need to come around here. So the Unsolved Mysteries was great television, Brian says. It was great. They came to my town once and recorded one in Brome Lake, Quebec, where I'm from. And if you guys don't, I've mentioned my show, but a lot of new people here. My town is actually featured in a show on Amazon right now, about Three Pines, it's called. And weirdly, Hillary Clinton often spends her summers there because the co-writer, she has a ghostwriter, a co-writer of a murder mystery that she wrote. And she's actually from my town. So the whole series of her name is Louise Penny. And weirdly, I helped, her career sort of got started because she was the local bookstore, which is sort of a really cool store. Carried her books and heavily promoted her, and a lot of people come through, and Hillary's been to the bookstore and this and that. I actually helped build that bookstore years ago when I was a teenager. So there you go. Funny things. I put the lights in. It was one of my between jobs type of thing in the summer. I used to have like 15 summer jobs, a main job, but I would do anything on the side to make sure no days were empty and I was doing well. Anyway, Hillary, funny story. So go back to the Nordstream pipeline story. So here's another thing. And this just shows exactly what this community notes thing in Twitter is doing. I'm gonna bring up the community notes in a second, but just mention what competitors are doing. And this is from Facebook. So talking about the Nord Stream pipeline. So before, Facebook used to fact check any bit of the Seymour Hersh story, highlighting that the U.S. had a large role, probably the main role, in the Nord Stream pipeline destruction explosion. And so Seymour Hersh was fact checked until just yesterday on Facebook. So here it is. Facebook has changed its censorship of Seymour Hersh's article, removing the black box and changing the warning from false information to partly false. So now it's only partly false, right? So it's partly false. And Elon Musk replies, they got caught. So Bloomberg is saying, what a mystery. It's gripping Europe. Oh my goodness, what do we do? No one's waiting around. This is not happening on Twitter. Facebook one step behind. And of course, the community notes feature inside of Twitter, we've been talking about for a while what an important thing it is, because regularly all you need is a bit of context, right? All you need is context, because that's how the fake news really operates. It removes context. And once context is removed, you can pretty much lie about anything. And that's been the trick that has been going on for a long time now. Aaron Rupar, the guy who edits all the Trump videos and who Glenn Greenwald is attacking regularly as not a journalist and just a video editor, that's his specialty, right? He'll cut out a piece of a video to make one other thing look pretty bad. That's what he does. So the community notes feature, we've been saying it for here a long time, what a really important thing this is. It's not just the changing of an algorithmic way and getting away from troll voting and upvoting things and distancing people into their echo chambers. It really just allows you to have just a little bit of context. And thinking even about AI, for example, I was on Spaces a few days ago with Mario Nawfal. I'm invited again tonight, by the way. I'm going to go again tonight, talk more about AI, have another go at it. And what we were talking about the other day was this ability of AI to protect us from fake news. Now, there is, a lot to that. Now, I don't even want to say it's got to be your best friend today in order to protect you from fake news and be motivated by you. All AI has to do to help us navigate the media is just add context, even just the other side of the story. That would be enough, right? Just the other side of the story is enough usually, because that's how the whole industry of fake news actually operates. It operates on the removal of context on both sides, right? Everyone is doing this. This is not a Democrat or Republican thing. It is just simply how the news businesses operate now. The corporate news businesses operate by removing context. And community notes is so helpful because it does add it. And I predict what we're going to see with AI looks pretty similar to that. Just adding context is enough for us to navigate. Just hearing the counterpoint. What's the best counter argument? If you know the best counter argument and you can withstand it, it will make you a lot more certain in your own argument, in your own point of view, in your own perspective. In fact, I think one of the most persuasive ways to talk to someone about any subject is to simply repeat their counter argument to whatever you're arguing. If you can say what they're trying to say, whoever you're arguing with, if you can say exactly what they're saying in a concise way that they agree with, if you understand the counterpoint, you're going to be way better off when it comes to actually persuading that person. Because if you can say what they said and still hold your opinion for X, Y reasons, you're going to be capable of persuading. One second. Kids are still running around. Jeez, kids, we love them. So that's the community notes thing has been used for a joke as well this weekend. That's also why I wanted to remind folks. So this weekend, the past couple of days, the blue checks, the legacy blue checks were removed from Twitter users. So the people who aren't paying now lost it. So he's had, CBS journalists and NBC journalists and anyone who wasn't willing to pay lost their blue check yesterday. And Elon put up a tweet saying, we're going to create a fundraiser for for the poor people with blue checks. And if you didn't see it, the crypto couple or the Bitcoin couple, I can't remember their actual names. They're going to be emceeing a bunch of it's Carla and Walker. I know their real names, but I forget their title of their group. They're married. They're a great couple. And they'll be emceeing one of the days at Bitcoin Miami, May 19th. So she made a video yesterday saying that instead of giving money to pets and adopting pets, you should actually adopt celebrity blue checks that have been lost to the legacy switch. Elon Musk even retweeted it. And so it kind of went viral yesterday. And he put out a tweet saying, we're going to create this charity for all the celebrities and all these people that have lost their blue checks. And Community Notes had a new function that I hadn't seen before, which is actually amazing. So there's been an evolution in the Community Notes feature. So the new one now says, this is clearly a joke, referring to what Elon was saying. So because, look, what percentage of people out there don't actually understand humor? It's a large number. It's like half the people often don't get satire, don't get the joke. So people were being serious and reacting to Elon Musk and trying to get the Community Notes to fact check what Elon said. And the new Community Notes note that went along with it said, this is clearly satire. We don't need to generate a community note if you don't get jokes. Very powerful stuff. Very, very powerful. So, and then Elon even went one step further and said that he's personally paying the Twitter Blue subscriptions of 3 accounts that he didn't want to lose. That he didn't want to lose. So he's paying for LeBron James to have his blue check. He's paying for William Shatner to keep his legacy blue check. And he's paying for Stephen King to keep their legacy blue check. So he's going and paying for that. So that's pretty funny, right? Can't complain about that. But again, this blue check thing has allowed us to add just a ton of context. Sorry, this change of blue check and the Community Notes together is allowing us to add just a ton of context, which is what we need, right? Carla Bitcoin, yeah. It's Carla Bitcoin now. She just changed it. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, because it was crypto. I think crypto was there for a while. Anyway, she's great. I've met her before. I met her at Bitcoin 2022. Hung out with her quite a bit, her and Walker, and just was already a huge fan from the start. I remember their early videos when they were just trying to get it together, and really glad it all worked out. Really nice and interesting people. So here's another one so a lot of people commenting on this blue check stuff yesterday, the loss of blue check. And you've got Julie Melner, and she says, Elon thinks this is a funny joke. As a former verified account who lost their blue check mark, I know how dangerous this really is. People are going to die. Jason Andrews responded to that, and he says, he put it in quotes, I swear to God, Dad, if you take my phone away, I'm literally going to die. Elon even put a undying emoji to that one. So it's pretty funny seeing this decay of the legacy media almost all at once, right? We see Community Notes adding context and allowing us to be not misled as much, right? The Community Notes are giving us the context. I think that's all we need is the context to get through a lot of this stuff. And if you have the counterpoint, it seems like a little thing, but it's actually big, right? It's actually big. It's allowing people to see the contrast. And I'll mention as we get to the end of this why that's important for Bitcoin, right? And now there's a bunch of stories at the same time. We've got the Nordstream one, and now there are the Hunter and January 6th stories, which also have percolated back up into the headlines in the past couple of days. So the reason why the January 6th story is becoming a story again is because this weekend, 60 Minutes is going to run a feature on Ray Epps. And if you guys don't know who Ray Epps is, Ray Epps was a guy who in all the video that we've seen from January 6th is regularly calling to storm the Capitol. He's got a bullhorn. He's talking, he's telling people to do it. There's a bunch of video of him doing it. Not a lot of video of other people doing it, but a lot of video of him doing it. And so the 60 Minutes show is going to run an episode dedicated, or a feature on the episode on Sunday night dedicated to this Ray Epps fella. Because a lot of people have been asking, where is Ray Epps? Who is Ray Epps? What's going on with Ray Epps? And so here's the 60 Minutes tweet. In conservative media, Ray Epps is a notorious villain responsible for turning the protests on January 6th into a riot. It is a convoluted conspiracy theory he denies. He's now in hiding, facing death threats. This Sunday, Mr. Epps sits down with 60 Minutes. Now, I don't know anything about Ray Epps, right? But Greg Price brings up an interesting an interesting way to see this, right? So both him and who's the other one who gets a really interesting way? Let me find it. And Darren Beattie. So Darren Beattie is the person, Darren J. Beattie is the person who has been seeking out this Ray Epps story for a long time. And here's what some people have said, right? The only Trump supporter. So in this case, Ray Epps clearly, according to the video, is a Trump supporter. He's got the MAGA hat. He's telling people, let's fight where our country's been stolen. Let's go get it back. Let's do this. Let's do that. And so he goes and starts protesting about at the January 6th protests, and tells people, go do this and go do that and da, 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 da. So now he's getting what looks like, according to 60 Minutes, a sympathetic and empathetic defense of whatever was going on. So it looks like he's a Trump supporter, and they're upset that he's getting death threats, and they're defending him. And so the Columbia Bugle says, and this is part of Darren J. Beattie's reporting, the only Trump supporter the mainstream media and politicians like Adam Kinzinger will defend is this Ray Epps guy. The other ones, if you remember what Greg Price was saying, people who were near the Capitol on J6 have been sitting in jail for almost 3 years. But the one guy caught on tape actually telling people to go inside the building gets an interview with 60 Minutes. Pretty interesting stuff, right? Pretty interesting. Now, I don't know anything about it, right? I'm just saying how this stuff is getting treated in the mainstream media, how it's getting covered, how it's getting framed. Where's the context, right? It's all about context. And indeed, that's where this community notes thing is so important. Bitcoin Graffiti asks, how does a community note get created? I'm not sure. I think you can do it right in a tweet, and then I think it does something about aggregating the comments behind it, but I don't know. I actually don't know the process. All I know is how it works algorithmically. I've never created a community note, so I should probably look into that. What I do understand about it is that it comes from the notion that the polarities are not what's important for context. It rewards ideas that are held across, let's say, partisan lines. If something is in aggregate accepted on both sides of a debate, then that is added as context. If it gets enough triggers that there is a counterpoint, it will add the counterpoint. So there you go. That's my understanding of it, but I don't know too much of it under the hood. So I guess we're going to get this story on the weekend about Ray Epps. We'll find out more then. We'll find out what 60 Minutes actually has to say about the guy. I don't know, right? But sounds like the defense will be perhaps suspicious looking. We'll see. Revolver's Darren Beattie is going to he's complaining because he's the person who has been covering the Ray Epps story the most, and he was never interviewed for the 60 Minutes piece. So he finds that itself suspicious. So he's going to be releasing his own response on Sunday. So that should be interesting. So you get the January 6th and the Ray Epps story, right, where context is important, and we've lost it, and we're going to find out more. And the blue checks are still telling us, the old blue checks, he's just an innocent Trump supporter, right? We have empathy because he's faced death threats. Well, what about the other guys? So we'll see. The other big story, and this has been called a super scandal this morning by Styx Hexenhammer, a super scandal. And what he says is that the Hunter Biden laptop case has now entered a whole new context, because there was sworn testimony by the former head of the CIA and under threat of perjury, right? Under threat of perjury. And the context of it is that the Anthony Blinken, who is now the Secretary of State, helped coordinate with this former head of CIA the 51 known liars who signed the Hunter Biden laptop disinformation letter. So that it came from the actual government and that it came from the campaign itself colluding in the lead up against the sitting president is a new frame that hasn't really been added as context. We didn't know it went right into the campaign, right? If it was just the government, that's one thing. But now that we see the involvement of Blinken, who's the Secretary of State and was involved in Joe Biden's campaign, he helped coordinate this letter. And the name of the fella, I don't know if I kept it here. I thought I did. Let me see where it is. So anyway, David Sachs says the Secretary of State orchestrated a hoax in which 51 government officials falsely accused the Russian government of disinformation in order to cover up the Biden family corruption. It is any wonder that American diplomacy is held in such low regard. Elon Musk answered to that or responded to that. There needs to be some accountability here. And indeed, you're still getting these stories where it always focuses on the dick pics and Hunter's body, and that's why people are obsessed about it. And indeed, people have questions about the money. People have questions about the influence. People have questions about all kinds of other things that we saw in the Hunter Biden laptop. And that always gets stunted with this conversation around the dick pics and the sex and whatever else was going on. But now that we know that it wasn't just the deep state that had a plan, that it was actually the coordination of the campaign, not that it's a surprise, but it does change the conversation. It does change how community notes would deal with this. It does change the context. And again, remember, the whole way information laundering works is you just remove context, you strip it bare. And once you're left with whatever nugget that serves your purpose, that's what you present as the main meal, and people eat it up, right? And if you don't put all the other contexts, that seems to work effectively. Now, community notes and these things, what they do by just adding context and letting you see it is they actually blunt this capacity to edit out whatever is inconvenient. It's hard to edit it out when there's new forces that bring it into light, right? So what we see with the story in with the Hunter Biden laptop is then the guy's name is Mike Morell, the former CIA guy, right? So his name is Mike Morell, and it looks like the Hunter Biden laptop story is just about as bad as we can get. And it now looks clear, right? We don't need to know anything about votes. We don't need to know about Dominion machines. We don't need to know about, the counting process, what went on with that. Are the states hiding ballots, or what's going on with that? What's going on in Arizona? What's going on in Georgia? Right? All of that stuff, while important, right? We've said for a long time, because we can't audit the actual election, do we know we had an election, right? So fixating on that problem is one thing, but now understanding that there was this operation beforehand absolutely brings the entire question of what happened during that week, that month in late October, early November into question, right? As I said, I've wondered and said it out loud before, did we have an election? If you can't count, if you can't audit, if you can't verify, did it happen? I mean, I understand the reality. People went to a place and voted, but was there an election? Going to vote and going through the process of voting and having an actual election are not the same thing. They're not the same thing, right? An election means, and again, this is why I've always stressed that Bitcoiners understand this subject much better than everyone else, because we understand how networks work. We understand how they're engineered. We understand how these systems come together. And Bitcoiners have long understood, just from the idea of scaling the Bitcoin network, that there are trade-offs between ease of use, human readability, and the credibility. So it's between convenience and credibility, right? So you can see all these blockchains that are all about speed and ease of use, and so they opt for the convenience side at the detriment of credibility, right? Because you don't get to have that. It's not an option to have super convenient and super credible. It doesn't exist, right? There's a trade-off, and people who understand blockchains and understand Bitcoin and the engineering trade-offs that went into Bitcoin understand this equation very well. Bitcoin favors, of course, the credibility way more than the convenience. No one is here in this morning having coffee talking about the breakup because we're worried about the throughput of the Visa network. We don't care, right? The capacity of transactions of the new FedNow system is not really what gets us excited in life. That's not really what we're after as far as change and making a better world. What we're after is credible money, not convenient money, credible money. So it has nothing to do with the throughput of Bitcoin. I've often said that it's one of the big differences and one of the tricks that the mind has trouble understanding when it comes to Bitcoin, and why you have so many people selling crypto in terms of performance statistics. All technology before Bitcoin was consumer technology in a sense, right? What we understand of as tech has really been about consumer tech. It's video games. And of course, when you look at a video game, you say, well, I want the new one, right? I want the more performant. I want the better graphics. I want the higher capacity, the higher resolution, all of that stuff. And so every time cell phones, right? They number them. You get cell phone, iPhone 1, 2, 3, we're at 15 or 16 or whatever we're at, right? And you want the new one, right? The black magic of Apple always makes me, and I'm susceptible. We've talked about it a few times. I don't know what magic they wield. But I'm always inclined to get new Bitcoin or new Apple stuff, right? And I shouldn't be, right? I resist, and I'm not mindless about it, but I see its effect. And you definitely do want the new one. So that's the hard part for some people about understanding Bitcoin, and what everyone seems to trip over when they first see Bitcoin. Oh, I can make it faster. I can make it better. I want the faster, better. What's the 2.0, right? What's the 2.0? And that all feeds into this idea, what we were just talking about with engineering when it comes to convenience, ease of use, and credibility. For a long time, the whole point was convenience, ease of use, performance, and these factors. Now, when it comes to video games, the credibility of the underlying software was not really, you didn't need it, right? If it worked, it worked. Credibility was in low demand, right? You were playing fantastical video games, so they had no relevance to what was going on as far as trusting how it was made and trusting what it says and what goes on. You can throw a patch in there and you're good, right? The video game doesn't operate correctly. There's some glitch. You can fix a glitch. Now, that has everything to do with credibility. No big deal. Now, in the case of Bitcoin, because it opts for credibility over convenience, that trade-off actually is a trade-off on how most people view tech. It's a new way of viewing technology, and it focuses on its survival rate. It focuses on the length of time it has survived without having to change. And the whole aspect of the credibility is why we like it, right? Because you can trust what's in it, because it hasn't opted for fail fast and break things and the normal consumer tech version of how technology has been commercialized and deployed. Bitcoin is resistant to the normal trend of consumer technology, and it's one reason why it's what's going on here. One second. Family, all kinds of family, all kinds of lost things and whatever, but it's fun. I like it. I like it. So the credibility issue, it's simply why Bitcoiners, never mind your political persuasion, understand the issue of voting and what went into the election a lot more. But that's just the technical side of voting, right? If you prime the engine beforehand with something like the Hunter Biden scandal, which happened in the days before the election, of course it had an influence. Now, we don't have to measure the influence to know that it affected the election. It certainly did. Not being able to air these concerns about whether Joe Biden, through his son, had any blackmailable material. It certainly looks like it. It certainly looks like people know what's going on. If you see the Chinese, they've been releasing bank records from Hunter Biden, and that's been thrown into a black hole. No one really knows what's going on with that. Now, I'm not going to go through and say I understand. I can see just as much partisan Republican stuff, and It looks like most of the crimes that are coming out of Hunter Biden's laptop look a little bit like, oh, filing documents and, you didn't pay your taxes and all that. That's not what we're worried about. We're worried about blackmailing the leader of America. And the interesting thing that it does for Bitcoiners, and I've mentioned this regularly, right? That this concept of the president being the leader of the free world becoming a joke and becoming humorous is so great for Bitcoin, because it really starts edging us into persuading people about the separation of money and state. If you get a guy like Joe Biden, who is now in charge of the economy, and this is what they're doing. Here's a new story about what's happening right now, right? Now, I don't mean this to be a technical conversation. Again, we're not in consumer tech. We're in the world now of psychology and credibility and momentum and enthusiasm. So you get Joe Biden, the steward of the gondola, right, sitting there. And what has he decided to do at this point in time? Well, they're upset about the metal content in coins. Right now, we've talked about in the 1960s, the coins were actually made of silver. I, at a arcade once, got, used to give them $10 and you get a roll of quarters. And that's how you'd play the machines, right? A roll of quarters equals $10. And you get a roll of quarters, you chuck them in the machine. I remember I got a roll once and I was like, these feel strange. What's the heck's going on here? They're all silver quarters, brand new. Well, never been used, but they were from the last time we had silver money in America in the 1960s. So I got a roll. I kept them, right? I have a pretty nice collection of silver coins and silver dollars and all that stuff. I collected those when I was a kid. And so the metal content from there started to get changed. Well, what are they doing now? Here's Wall Street. Here's the CNBC article. New bipartisan bill will let the U.S. Mint alter the metal content of coins to save money. Again, Wall Street Silver adds, this is the path the Roman Empire went down. Reduce the metal content of coins, make the money worthless. This is late stage empire stuff. None own enough silver and gold. Get it while you still can. And he goes through the history of it. So quarters until 1964 were 90% silver, 10% copper. Now they're 91% copper and 8% nickel. So what they're going to do is add more nickel, I guess, and see how that goes. And then what he says is, and here's the trend, and here's where the persuasion becomes interesting, right? That the next step is to just put in digital zero metal worthless currency CBDCs. And he writes, if they go 100% digital with no limit on the number of CBDC dollars that they can create, then there is a path to hyperinflation. Our politicians don't know how to control spending, debt, or entitlements. This type of monetary system we are heading towards is doomed to failure. What we've been saying here for a long time is that the future of the US dollar is exactly what it sounds like. Fiat money became political money in the since the economic crisis. It became purely political money. We've said what fiat really means. It means to speak, to decree, to declare, to use words, to define by words. I think it just becomes the actual implementation of policy. And by that, the easiest way to understand it is it's food stamps. Food stamps are a type of political money. They are there to achieve policy objectives. And so there is a whole way to understand the US dollars as a form of UBI subsidy for folks and a type of CBDC all rolled into one. And that looks like more and more a credible future. Now, if that happens, there's an actual interesting byproduct that can come of that, in that the political dollars end up becoming referenced by something else, because not everyone wants to save these food stamps. No, you're not going to get food stamp saving, right? No one is going to pay and hoard their wealth in food stamps, especially not the energy companies, who are the real perpetrators of the Nordstream pipeline, right? And by that, I mean they're the real responsible parties, and that they backstopped what was going on. The American energy companies had to say to the US military, whoever specifically blew up the pipeline, that they could supply energy to Europe in order to avoid catastrophe. So that fact is super important when analyzing what went on with the situation over there. So are these energy companies going to turn around and say, oh, I'm going to save food stamps? No, they're not going to save food stamps, right? They're going to want to save money, which is Bitcoin's big aim. If Bitcoin becomes the psychological reference rate for energy companies, we're in hyper Bitcoinization. We are in an era of the Bitcoin standard. And it doesn't mean that every single person has to hold Bitcoin. Unfortunately, there was a time in my life when I believed we had to get it in everyone's pocket, and we would be successful. We will one day, but it's not in the next 3-4 years. Getting it into every energy company's balance sheet seems to be the more direct route to getting a real change in society and to separating money and state. Now, it creates a Russian oligarch situation where the energy companies become disproportionately powerful vis-a-vis the state. That's a state that Bitcoiners are going to have to navigate in our own way and through our own spiritual inner guidance, right? We're going to have to infiltrate the energy companies, re-incentivize them to give, energy systems, to build energy systems that are going to be good for humanity and not just good for their bottom line. We've got to convert oil companies into nuclear companies and all that kind of stuff. Now, not everyone, we love oil, we love combustion. There's going to be plenty of oil companies doing great. But we've got to find new energy companies that will help build new infrastructure, decentralized infrastructure, see different ways to make money. But that's just pure market based, right? I think that will come about as we continue to show financing models for energy systems that aren't about US military occupation of oil fields and then the monopolization of energy markets with the US dollar as part of the policy for exporting the US dollar and US T-bills as the number one US export there is, all based on its tie-in with oil. So we're in a time of big change, right? This is it. It looks like if you start looking at all these stories, the narrative of separation of money and state starts to become way more palatable in the sense that we've seen the lying. The lying is getting harder and harder to deny. The lies are getting bigger and bigger and bigger with more ramifications. And guess what? There's people even speculating that Joe Biden is going to announce his re-election campaign next week. And again, there is no better symbol for Bitcoin than watching this guy diluting the money, turning it into whatever, going for the digital version, going for the food stamp version, while being completely witless and unaware, having all of these scandals around him, needing the no blue check, fake news, fake media to protect him at all costs, at all times. The ability of that whole construct to maintain coherence is becoming very difficult for them because of community notes, because of people awakening, because of people sharing these stories, and eventually the capacity of Bitcoin to contrast with everything that is left propping this up, because it's just money propping it up now. It's just people trying to protect their income, trying to protect their careers, trying to protect their credentials, trying to protect their access. That is what keeps this thing going forward. That is the perpetuation of the system. But it's weak, right? This was again, go back to the engineering, convenience or credibility, right? It's not just about building election systems or monetary systems. It's about the whole system and their convenience of, oh, we can just slap on the title of leader of the free world and they have to believe us. Oh, these are the good guys. Everyone has to believe us. It works on some people, right? But the capacity of that to hypnotize many people is getting lost every day. Community notes, AI can help. But most importantly, understanding that it is actually just the money that helps perpetuate this, that it is just the convenience of being near the money printer, being near these systems that allows the whole system to perpetuate. Bitcoiners now understand that the credibility is way more important in order to perpetuate the system. It's not throughput. It's not any of these performance statistics. It's not facts like the leader of the free world is the president of the United States. It's a concept that the credibility of the system and all of its appendages, all of its constituent parts function together in a way that we can verify, that we can accept and understand, and will help make this better world. So there you go. That's what's going on this morning. Funny that all these fake news stories are happening at once. And each of them, if they were treated within the context that they deserve, is enough to bring down a government for sure. And you've got multiple ones, right? So there you go. So we got some talk here about, let's see what's going on in the, so Bitcoin graffiti, I'll get to the community note one in a second. It's funny how the narrative from 60 Minutes is set up before the show actually comes out. Conspiracy theorists is their favorite phrase to seal it all up. Again, I keep reminding everyone, what's great is when they start calling RFK a conspiracy theorist. It's amazing. It's like your dad was murdered, and then his murderer was murdered. Your uncle was murdered. His murderer was murdered. His murderer's murderer was murdered. And if he asks questions about that, he's a conspiracy theorist. He's a conspiracy theorist. I have questions about all my family getting killed and their killers getting killed. I just want to know. Conspiracy theorist. It's great, right? Great. And we were talking the other day about his nuclear stance. I think someone mentioned he was anti-nuclear. Look, what I see from RFK so far is someone who can learn and change his mind, and that's all we can ask for, right? I mean, you can't get everything right all the time. So this is someone who's capable of changing his mind and learning on the fly and being open about what he doesn't know. That's what's needed, right? That's what's needed. So there you go. Yeah, persuasion. That's definitely what's going on with these persuasion. Yeah, persuasion. That's persuasion. You need to join Birdwatch is how the Bitcoin or how the community notes are created, as I understand. The elections are safe and effective at placing correct crook in the preferred position. Yeah, exactly. I stopped buying it because it's too slow. Good one. I think folks have been using Hunter to black. Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, we don't have to know in order to see the results, but it looks like it. Yeah. I found a 1945 penny wartime nickel. Cool. Yeah, when you go to Japan, the 1 cents are like made of tin or something. They're just the lightest, crappiest, most Gresham's law version of money. Again, why I always say that Satoshi Nakamoto was chosen as a Japanese name as the creator of Bitcoin, because I do believe Japan and in a certain sense Korea are going to hit the Bitcoin standard first, simply because their financial systems, their fiat systems, were so predicated on manipulation against the US dollar that they're just that much further ahead. And I've always believed this story that in 2008, when the name Satoshi Nakamoto was used, it was in order to have this sort of moral authority of knowing what things were like in Japan and saying to America, this is happening to you. Now, the difference is happening to Japan, it's not the end of the world because it still gains meaning relative to the US dollar, right? Remember, I've been saying this for years, there is no other fiat currency, really. It's all US dollars. Everything else is just relative to the US dollar, and then there are some levers you can use to manipulate it. But it all is just a derivative of the US dollar. That can be realistic in the sense that where I was in Barbados, that's a straight up pegged stablecoin to the US dollar, 2x pegged stablecoin. Like Hong Kong, which was a 7x or 6x or whatever stablecoin to the US dollar. And so these systems either are explicit stablecoin tethered to the US dollar, pegged to the US dollar systems, or they're like the Canadian dollar, where they're free floating. Some people have Canadian dollar in their reserve, but really it still is relative to, oil output. The US economy is this big. The Canadian economy is 1/10 the size. US oil output is this much. Canadian oil output is this much. Relative, it goes up and down based on futures and output and potential output. It isn't just oil, of course, but that's a big one. Real estate and all these other factors end up going into it, but it's still just relative to the US dollar. The measuring stick is the US dollar. And so the capacity for the Japanese yen to be estranged from reality wasn't really there because it still had a reference to the US dollar. When Satoshi Nakamoto says what's coming for the US dollar, and he says, you're Japan, it's different because that's the basis. And it's the same analogy I've used here many times, that, the metric system in water, right? The numbers were arbitrary. It was the properties of water that went in to create the metric system. And because they're constant and stable, it was useful. Water always boils at that temperature and always freezes at that temperature. And because of that, we can build an entire measuring reference rate out of it. If the US dollar is the base, just like water, of the entire system, right? It is the thing from which you measure. It is the reference rate, and you actually start changing the properties and values of it. The whole system breaks very quickly and becomes useless. And that's what we're dealing with here. And it looks like Satoshi Nakamoto was saying that it was a forewarning. You are Japan now, America, in the 2008 crisis. And it's different because if that's the case, then everything else changes. And that, in fact, would lead the opportunity for something like the Chinese renminbi to take over. What Bitcoiners are saying is it's not just going to be, and this is the Ray Dalio argument as well, right? That it's cycles and then it's China's turn because of XYZ. What Bitcoiners are saying is, nope, it's nobody's turn. We're going to separate money and state, and no one gets a chance. The state will be its own thing, and money will be its own thing, and the state will have accountability and a reference now for what they're spending and all those things. And so the food stamp system will have a reference of something other than the US dollar. The US dollar could be used for it, but there'll be a different reference and it will gain value and gain meaning out of something else. Just make them out of plastic already. Like those fairs or circuses. It seems like there will be a U.S. military of occupation of Bitcoin mines. It's what they do best. That would be dark. I hope not. I remember talking with the inventor of public key cryptography, Whitfield Diffie, and he worked in military cryptographic systems and all of that, and was very interested in how it works. And he was very impressed, let's say, when he found out that not in a against Bitcoin way, but just marveled at how the Venezuelans, this was in 2017, were catching miners by looking at the electrical grid and finding them that way. And he's like, well, that's an attack vector, because that's what, remember, cryptographers have to think about what the attacker is thinking. That's the game of a cryptographer, right? That's what makes cryptography not consumer electronics, by the way. That's the main factor, is that because it's based on cryptography, and cryptography is always involved in an unfair fight against the people who would break it, who just have to think of one thing, just get it right one time, versus the people who have to defend it and protect it, who have to preemptively think of all potential attacks and ward against them. That unfair fight means that cryptographers are always thinking adversarially. They're always thinking about what the other person thinks, which is why it's not consumer technology. Consumer technology does not have an adversary. If there's an adversary, the adversary is just competition, right? But the adversaries maybe viruses, I guess. The adversarial thinking is not required for the credibility of the system. Beating adversaries who are attacking the system isn't really a factor, which is why convenience is more important. And which I'm not arguing against consumer technology, by the way. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying Bitcoin isn't it. And because it has to have this credibility thing, like election systems, not consumer technology, they have to have credibility, and there is this trade-off between credibility and convenience, which Bitcoiners have understood for a long time now, right? And that's just the world we live in. So when you think about credibility and convenience, the attack vector of that Whitfield Diffie was concerned about here was about it goes into the credibility, in a sense, of Bitcoin. And now there's enough hash rate and there's other ways to look at it. But just seeing that a centralized grid offers the opportunity for a form of military operation, right? You can see where the energy is being drawn and therefore you can attack, is another thing that leads Bitcoiners like myself to talk about decentralizing the grid for that reason alone, so that someone can't look into it, find out where you're mining, and then occupy those mining sites, which is something we need to do over time. That's not a today thing, I don't think, but we're getting there. Morning big TC Moon Guy. If RFJK Jr. campaigns in Tennessee, I'm headed out to hear him speak. Cool, Ordinary Bitcoin. Yeah, I'm still trying to find him. I got his number. I had someone, a big Bitcoin fella, who would be an excellent donor, call me yesterday and see if I can reach him, because he was hoping, he was listening to the show and hoping that RFK would show up with us in Tennessee, in Miami. Still working on it. I think we're going to get him, only on a inclination and a feeling. I think we're going to get him. So there you go. Daniel says, I'm looking forward to mining and energy talks at the conference. Yeah, there's a lot of them. There's a lot. Big energy show. I think, again, I'd say our audience is the most energy literate in the world and allows us to see this stuff. Hope you reach him. We're gonna get him. It's gonna work out. You just you have to have the faith, right, in this game a lot. RFK and Vivek, yeah, we love them. We love the conversations. All right, team, that's all I got for this morning. I'll join tomorrow morning. Monday and Tuesday might be difficult. Tuesday for sure I have a flight, so that's going to be out. So I'm going to join tomorrow, and we'll get together. Monday I'll try. Tuesday no. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday we're back. All right, team. Happy Saturday, Robert. Yeah, things changing, guys. All right. Peace. Take it easy, everyone. I will enjoy my Saturday, brother man. I will indeed. I'll go talk to those screaming kids. They're all excited to be around their grandparents and everyone, right? Big days. All right, everyone. Peace. See you tomorrow.